Good evening. I'm Scott Binsack, and thank you for joining me. Tonight, I'm going to be discussing the long road home, surviving child abuse as an adult. This topic, I believe for many, is a very serious one. Anything involving children, I believe, is serious. When it comes down to sexual, physical, mental abuse, especially by family members, it's a serious road home, a very serious road. I know. I was the victim of severe sexual, physical, and mental child abuse from the age of 3 till roughly 15 and a half, 16 when I left home and never looked back. One incident for somebody can damage them the rest of their life, especially if involved rape. Any of it, to me, child abuse is a form of rape. When an adult takes advantage of a very young child for their own sick needs. And there's some differences here where, there's child molesters and what we call pedophilia. I've been researching this since I left home, 25 years now. And all the research and all that is not what helped me heal as an adult, to be at peace with myself and those that harmed me. Sexual abuse is so damaging because the guilt, the shame, the insecurities that follow from it as one gets older from surviving the experience as a child affects everything that we do in our daily lives as an adult, especially in the relationship categories, the decisions that we make, what we attract, the people that we attract. And most who are abused sort of block it out. And they move on with their life thinking that this abuse does not affect them. But it does. It affects you very deeply. And as I said, in the decisions that you make, in the relationships you carry on, it will eat you alive underneath it all, even though you may have filed it away. I know this too. My abuse surrounded my father's family. There was my father and then 6 siblings. My abuse surrounded, and before I get into this quickly, I'm now able, and have been for some time, able to discuss this, and much of what I'm going to discuss tonight and state has never been told to anybody except a very limited few. And my mother, she's deceased, and even I didn't tell her all of it. She knew some of it, hid some of it. My father, who was a cop in Nassau County on Long Island, and all this abuse stemmed from Long Island, New York, where I grew up and I lived most of my life. And as I said, for my father's family. And whether you're male or female and you get abused, it's shameful to the person that gets abused. And you feel, as a child, you say to yourself, and it even carries with you, what did I do wrong to deserve this? Why am I being abused? I'm going to tell you the things that I did to get over the abuse, the serious abuse that happened to me, in an effort to hopefully help you, if you have suffered from this abuse, not allow it to be stuck, either filed away or still be showing its ugly face in your day-to-day lives. Because it's not a demon, and that's what it basically is. It's a demon that you want. You want to, you'll never forget it, but you can deal with it. So my abuse stemmed from, and this, some of this is going to be very graphic, so I warn you, because I'm a straight shooter. I'm going to tell you how it is. I'm going to tell you real what happened. I'm not going to go into every incident because there's so many. I mean, I have a book coming out. It'll be on video as well, and it'll be more described in there in serious detail. So my father's family, this large family in the village of Westbury on Long Island, was a very prominent family, prominent Catholic family. And on the outside, they looked as they were the best of everything. Successful business, big in the community, kids all in Catholic private schools, you name it. Behind closed doors, to me, it was hell. To me, it was hell. And the abuse would happen to me when my parents, and they got divorced when I was 4, as I've discussed in other shows. But before that, it started when they would go over for Sunday dinners, or I would be dropped off there for babysitting by my grandmother, who was also an alcoholic. And the abuse stemmed from my father's youngest brother, who's now a convicted child molester on Megan's law, under Megan's law, and thus on Megan's list. Finally, he got what he deserved, as far as, well, I shouldn't say that. Finally, he got caught, and it was proven. But he basically got a slap on the wrist. And it's very sad, and I won't go into that till the end of the show about the laws governing child abuse. Because it's so detrimental, I believe it's up there in the categories of murder. And so my father's younger brother, who's roughly, I think he's about 6 years older than me, 7 years. So my father was the oldest of 7, so I'm one of the older grandchildren. There's one grandchild older than me. So I was the second grandchild. And when I was even, I remember this too. And my mother would tell me stories how I would come downstairs because from the house on Sunday dinners, from the stairs, inside stairs in the house, and I would say that my uncle had abused me. I would say things as a child like, he touched my penis, he did this, he did that. And the uncle was confronted about it, and nothing ever, people live in denial and doing nothing. And it was always that I was the child. So, and anyone who knows, this happens a lot in families. They live in denial and they say that couldn't have happened. He's making that up. Or the adult that's accused says he's making that up. And as time went on, it continually got worse as far as the acts and how much it happened. And I kept telling and saying and crying out. Then my parents got divorced and all mayhem broke out, as I've discussed in some other shows. And I began to be shifted all different places as a kid. My dad, my mom, my grandparents, back. And then another uncle came into play, my godfather. And the abuse got... Now, I want to bring up as well, as a child, it wasn't just a male who abused me. At the younger age, it was also a female. One of my aunts abused me. And she was also abused. And there was at points when I was a child where they would even swap me off between aunt and uncle in the same sittings. And I believe to whether somebody's mentally ill or they have, and I don't believe in the thing if you're abused as a child, you're going to be an abuser when you grow up of children. I don't buy that. And I looked at statistics, and many experts don't buy that either. Um, some claim that. So this abuse went on amongst those two, and then it started with my godfather. And this abuse, he was a married man, children. This abuse got so severe, and I can remember when I was 5 and a half, we were in his BMW, and he had picked me up from my mother's house and said he was going to take me out to the movies. And he was also a cocaine addict, functioning alcoholic and cocaine addict. He said, "Here, I want you to try this." And it was cocaine. And he had it in a little Ziploc bag. He used to snort it out of there with a big pen. And I tried it, and I was 5 and a half. I was 5 and a half years old. I remember it distinctly. And that night, instead of taking me to the movies, he took me to a place called the Comac Motor Inn on Long Island. It was it's still there. And I happened to recently see it when I was out on the island. And part of the show is what I'm going to explain. As an adult, there's triggers that will bring back, and it could be smells, sights, sounds, anything that will bring back these incidents in your childhood, especially if or when they come back, if you haven't dealt with them, it could be like, I mean, severely traumatic. And as I discussed in another show, Living on the Lam, how I imploded my company years later after I became very successful because of an incident where I had a gun put to my head, and it triggered major trauma for me. And it brought me back to this little boy that I was, this abused little boy after I ran away from home. See, when I ran away from home, my way to deal with it was not go out and be destructive. My way was to turn it, I took it and took all that anger, pain, and hurt and put it into work. I became a workaholic. I mean, severe workaholic. I was on a mission. And to cover all that up, I covered it with business and business and business and success and more success, and then power and material things and you name it, anything I could do to cover it. And I was doing this subconsciously because I had filed all this stuff away. When I left home, I never looked back. I filed these feelings, this guilt, but I took the actions that came from the abuse with me. In other words, everything I chose from the moment I left home, the people I associated with, my relationships, my decisions in life that I made, were stemmed in part from this abuse that happened to me. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know. I recreated myself for the talents that I had and put it into positive fashion, but at the same time, I was suffering on the inside. And this affected me with, my first marriage, and, well, I've been married once, but with my first marriage, and the people we attract and what I attract, and I had massive trust issues, major trust issues, insecurity issues, but I was always secure in my business, powerful, secure, confident. But on the other side, on the personal level, horrible. So I always tried to stay in the business side. So now I'll get back to the story here. And this is just in part. So he takes me to this hotel, the Comac Motor, and it's one of those hotels you go to where you can get a room for a few hours. Cash, roll out. They have the different rooms, like the jungle room, the this room, the that room. Or they have regular rooms as well. And I'll never forget it. He took me into that room. And he had, I would assume, close to an ounce of cocaine, a couple fifths of Stoli vodka. And he He basically not only molested me, he raped me, got me high, even drunk, raped me, and to the point of uh, and by this point in my life, from the abuse from the other brother and the aunt, as a child, I was lost. I had no real childhood, not just from my parents' divorce. That was the little part. The severe part was all this abuse, and it became physical, violent as well, with my uncle years later. So when I got home that night, after he dropped me off, my mother asked me how the movies were. I said, they were great. She said, what did you see? He had already told me what to say. We'd seen what we'd seen, da 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 da. And he had come in and sort of played it along. Meanwhile, I'm there, and I remember this as the day is long. How disgusting I felt, how dirty I felt, how just I had to take a. I asked my mother to if I could take a shower. And she said yes. I think I stayed in that shower. I don't even know how long. And I sucked it up. I sucked it up. And I don't know. I think it's because of all the things I had suffered even up until that as a child that it made me stronger. And each time it made me stronger. And my mother didn't even notice how drunk I was and high I was. And here I am. I was 5.5, 6 years old. So I reported, well, how this happened is that I went to see my father on a weekend a couple of weeks later. My father is an ex-Nassau County detective, cop on Long Island. And he didn't get along with my godfather, and that's for other reasons that I discussed in another show about scars of a child. And I told him what happened. And he went ballistic. But my father went more ballistic, I think, because he didn't like my uncle to begin with, and he needed a reason. Not so much to my dad and I don't get along even to this day, for many reasons. But my father, I reported it to the police. So now the police check out the times I say, and I'm a little boy, times I say, describe the room, everything. It all checks out. Everything checks out, and they arrest him. Meanwhile, he's denying this. People in the family are saying I made it up for attention, that there's no way, da 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 da. Now, abuses behind the scenes between brothers and sisters have been going on in this family before I was ever born. And it trickled down to the grandchildren. And I'm not the only grandchild that my father's youngest brother, the convicted child molester, molested. There were several of the and I can remember even when I got older and I had left home after that, I tried to warn my other aunts and uncles about this, and they just, nobody cared. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted to face it. Everybody lived in this world of this family was so into themselves that, and so selfish, and most of them still are today. I don't speak to them, nor do I want to speak to them. And if they watch this, I don't care. And my book's going to name names to the T of everything that's happened to me. Because this story needs to be told to help others so that they can gather the strength. So that you can gather the strength if you've been abused or have suffered things to pull your life together so that you can live a normal life. because I know many people struggle with this, and many people don't report it. So now here I go and report it, and because my family's as influential as they are, my great uncle's a judge. Well, we called him my great uncle. He was married into the family via somebody, a cousin of mine, their father. And he was my grandfather knew him very well. He was very prominent in Westbury, in our community. Through these connections and some good lawyers and a lot of money, and back then child abuse was not, it was something that was like, okay, really no big deal. He got a slap on the wrist and had to see a psychiatrist. And then he stopped seeing the psychiatrist. It didn't matter. And he went in to see the psychiatrist drunk or coked up, so it didn't matter. A few years back, and this isn't the last incident with this man. The incidents got worse after that. After he got away with that, he still couldn't stay away. He was obsessed with me. So was the younger brother. Obsessed with me, with this abuse. And as I discussed in my other show about growing up with the mob, there was many a time that I could have, they have no idea how close they came to not being killed. And I will say that I have nothing to hide. And it wasn't going to be done by me. It would have been done by somebody else who offered to do it. Very serious men. Because they knew some of the story, and they protected me as I protected them in other ways. Point being is, over the years, the abuse got worse as I grew up. Once he got away with this the first time, years later, him and his wife got divorced, and he was getting thrown out of his house. And what does my mother do? My mother allows this man to move in with her for a while. And then even after this incident, after I had left my mother's and I was with my father years later, my mother signed over custody to my godfather, this man. And here I was, at that time I was 13, I believe. I'm stuck with this man by order of the court. By order of the court. Knowing that this man abused me. My mother, to protect him, said that I lied and made it up, yet the police report said everything was correct. He had already been convicted of it. And as I discussed in other shows, my mother lived in this denial, and I found out years later why. The shocking truth. The shocking truth behind it. So these abuses like these nature, and then I ended up living with this man, and the abuses became every day. I quit school in 8th grade because there was no way I could. School was boring to me, but most of all because I couldn't even focus on school. Not just from the drugs, the alcohol, the sexual abuse, the physical abuse. My uncle used to get very physical and very angry, hitting me, even tying me to the bed, and leaving me there, and I couldn't get off the bed. And as I discussed in one of these other shows, there was a time where one night, subconsciously, I took a bag of cocaine from him, and it had been up for 2 days, and the abuse just went on, and it wasn't just the one uncle, it was also the younger, now convicted uncle. It was the both of them. And I was abused by both of them almost for a 24 to 48 hour period straight, to the point of I was made to lay down in the bathtub. And this happened at my grandmother's house while she was in Florida, because my father's younger brother lived there. He was one of the mama's boys that couldn't leave home, and I'll say it that way. Anybody watching this, no disrespect, but if you're 30 years old and you still live at home with mom, and there's no reason for you to be there, I got issues with that. But that's a whole different story. And she was away in Florida, so they had the house to themselves, and it became this, and it happened many times like that. many times like that over the years. That house had more abuse happen in it, not just to me, but others, that it's just, if the walls could speak. So, as I said at another show, I had grabbed his cocaine while he was sleeping, and I ingested it all. I subconsciously just wanted to die, and there was that 48-hour period, and I was forced to lay in this bathtub because they thought it was a great idea if they would urinate on me and even partially defecate on me, and they thought that was, and I can remember them even unscrewing the mirrors off the bathroom medicine chest. They took the mirrors off the bathroom medicine chest to snort all the cocaine on. I remember it as clear as day. And this happened between the master bedroom and my grandmother's main master suite there in the house. It's a very large home. And it just went on and on. And then finally, on the second day is when I ingested this cocaine, and I ended up hiding under a bed in one of the other bedrooms. I remember turning blue. And wanting to die. And I survived. I've survived many things in my life. How I survived that then, I have no idea, because I should be dead. Any young child who ingests close to an ounce of cocaine, and I did, I can assure you. I was so blue. I remember my heart racing, and then the fear of my uncle when he woke up and found his cocaine was gone. Forget that I was dying and hiding under the bed, but the fear that his cocaine was gone, he'd go into a rage. And so this is the type of acts, and I was basically used as a, and as I said, it was by some females as well, my other female relatives, but more so as I got older by, and this is what I knew, this is the habit that I knew, but I always knew it was wrong. I always knew it was wrong. I always knew it was wrong, and I always felt dirty and ashamed and guilt-ridden even as a child. And as an adult, I can look back now and see that, because I faced these horrors, these demons. And one of the nights I remember, because he wanted me to penetrate him, and I refused. I refused. I said, I can't do that. And I can remember I said I couldn't do that, and I ran. And I ran as far as I could out of the house. And when I say far as I could, meaning in the house. And he came after me, and I had run out of the house. It was cold. This was January. And I hid outside, and I had no shoes on. I was in sleeping attire, kids attire. I think I had just my underwear on, to be honest, or whatever. I think I was just had underwear. And I hid in my grandmother's station wagon, one of those, and I remember, green with the wood on the sides. And I hid in the back seat, and it was freezing. It was January. It's cold, very cold. And he was looking for me, and da 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 da. And I stayed in that car all night till the morning, till I knew he fell asleep. And I froze. I mean, I froze. But anything, I can remember praying to God. I talked to God a lot as a child. I talked about a lot as a child. me and Jesus had a close relationship, because I was raised Catholic, and then years later, after I died in an auto accident, religions to me are, I believe in God and Jesus and everything, but I don't practice one religion anymore, because what I saw when I died is completely different, and I'm not going to get onto that subject, but not completely different, but I mean it's about religions. God hears all prayers. So, point being is that these type of horrors lived with me till the day and happened till basically up until the time I left home. And then the mental abuse that went at the name calling, the horrors, just you're going to be nothing, you're going to do anything, it's all your fault, it's all your fault, it's all you heard, it's all your fault. And then if I go and tell anybody, they didn't believe me. So then I came into this denial state. I used to live, denial state, a defensive state, to where I got so defensive about anything anybody ever said to me. And it stemmed from my childhood, and then later on in life, when I had another bizarre incident happen to me that trailed my life for 14 years, which I'm going to be doing a very powerful 2-hour show about, called The Fall from Grace. And I don't defend myself to anything now. Zero. Nor will I. The truth is the truth. You set it free. It is what it is. So these demons will stay with you as an adult if you don't deal with them. So here I go, and I leave home at 16. I live in my car. I took the risks, as I discussed last week in the show, and I how should I say? I went and took this anger and this pain and just I shoved it back, and I just put it into work. I knew I had to survive. I knew I wanted to become something, and I knew the only thing I could use was my gifts that I have in construction. And there was so much pain and so much anger, as well as the talent that I had, that I was self-made millionaire by 23. Magazines for my work. And I was building multi-million-dollar homes and restoring and renovating all those from the age of 18 on. Really heavy-duty stuff. And it was because of this, because I learned, which was a good thing, I learned how to take the bad and turn it into something good. Because if you can take the anger and the pain and the guilt and shovel it into something else positive, use it as fuel in the soul, you'll be able to move, you'll be able to do anything. And you don't, because you're so involved in what you're doing and pushing that, using that passion, the passion you have to do something, and using the hate and the anger and the guilt as the fuel to fuel that passion, you have no chance to look back at anything. It's a good thing, but it's a bad thing, because all those demons are inside of you. So now, as I go on with my life as an adult, my relationships with people, females, my ex-wife, we are what we attract. So in that realm, I was always attracting people that I wanted to fix. I became a fixer. So here, I want to fix you. And subconsciously, this is what I was doing. And I had no trust of anybody. I couldn't trust anybody because of what happened to me. And I always defended myself, even with the littlest things. And as time went on, I forgot all this. Meaning, I thought I forgot about what happened to me as a child. But I didn't. It showed up every day in my life. Meaning, not in my head, but in my actions. And that's as an adult, that's what happens in our choices, in our decisions. And as I said, the people we are with and the people we attract in our relationships. And it will cause somebody who could be good in our life. We could be able to, I used to push people away. I would subconsciously push people away because I didn't believe that anyone could love me. Because I had no love as a child. The most love I had came from my mother and my mother's parents. My father's family, there was no love. None. And I believed that no one could love me because I didn't have love, as well as I felt guilt. This guilt of when you were abused or you're raped or this type of abuse carries with you, and you have to face it. So here I am, and my personal life, I mean, I had children, and I was raising them well. I wanted to make sure my children never went through anything I went through, and I was super protective of my children around. I never let my children see anybody in that side of the family except for two people, which was my father's middle brother and my aunt, who is a year down from that. And even then, I was skeptical, and not so much about abuse, but because of the personality that they carry. I didn't want anything near my children. Nobody in that family near my children. And part of you being overprotective with your children is not a good thing either. So here you are living in these realms of, and it's all because of the abuse. And even in my business decisions, even though I was confident in their, and my emotions and how I used to get angry very quickly, or I emotional, and it was not a good thing. And it was all because this little boy was trapped inside that never faced these demons. And as I discussed, what happened was I had a gun put to my head in my driveway by a capo in the Banana crime family I was around and I was with. And it was from that moment on that it was a shocking feat to me. It was just threw me back. I have no idea whether it was because of it was the look in the man's eyes, and it reminded me of my uncle. And as I said, as adults, there are triggers, and that was the trigger. It was the look in the man's eyes, and the only time before that I ever thought about the abuse that happened to me was when I would look at my sons. Later, I had a daughter from the second woman I was with. And I found out my first son really wasn't mine years later. But I would look at my sons and I would say, how could anybody, a male, even a female, want to touch a child? And that's the only time it ever came back to me, when I looked at them at times. And I'd be like, because it would come back and I'd be like, how in the world? You really must have some screws loose. And if it was up to me, I believe the laws are very lax in this area. But that's neither here nor there at the moment. My point being is that as adults, it affects everything that we do. Even if you're abused once, one episode of abuse will affect somebody, not can, will affect somebody the rest of their life. Even though if they claim, this hasn't affected me, I forgot it, I don't want to face it, because most people don't want to face it because they feel dirty, they feel ashamed, they feel like it's their fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Don't carry the guilt. It's not your fault. There's nothing you could have done as a child to fix it, to change it, to stop it. And even if you reached out to other people to try to stop it and tell other family members, and they lived in denial and did nothing about it, that's not your fault either. None of it is your fault. Children are innocent. And I will tell you this, if your child comes to you and ever tells you that somebody is abusing them, and they tell you out of the blue, or they're touching them and doing things, believe them. Believe them. Very young children do not lie. They don't. Especially about matters like that, and they're not going to pull it out of the blue. Don't live in denial if your child comes to you and tells you that. and especially about another family member. Don't. Because that means you have the issue. That you don't want to face something within yourself that you cannot answer and take care of your child and protect your child. Because you're too fucked up yourself in some area that you don't want to listen to your child. And I'll use the word. I have no other word I want to use. Because any adult that ignores a child's pleas for help is fucked up. Because the answer to the child for the plea, if answered, could stop a world of issues and pain and hurt and harm to that child. So pay attention and listen to your children. And I don't care if it's a brother, an uncle, a father, a grandfather, or whatever. I even had a grandfather. I was abused by my grandfather on one night that he babysat for me. And it's the same father, my father's father. And my uncle, my godfather, claimed that the reason why he abused was because he was abused by his father. After what happened to me at that incident, I was 7 at that time. I remember it as clear as day. I was on the couch in the second living room in my grandparents' house in Westbury. Horrible. However, after this incident happened to me, to where I retracted back, and I'm not going to go into that story again. You can watch it in another video. But in part, it caused me and forced me to look at the demons within myself from these incidents, serious incidents of abuse. There was another incident after my uncle had moved, another incident. There were so many incidents, it doesn't matter. It was a regular basis. My entire childhood. It's just, and as I said, it would forget about even the issues of my parents with the divorce and being thrown here and there and those abuses and back and forth and back and forth. And then the abuse from my father in a physical manner. It's very violent. Get very violent. And then my stepmother, the abuses are just, they went on. It was like I was a magnet, and I felt that way. I said to myself as a kid, I can remember my kid, I said to myself, what am I doing to deserve this? And then no one wants to help you. No one wants to help you. No one wants to believe. Or no one in my situation wanted to believe. And on the average, people don't want to believe. Especially about family members. There was an incident after my godfather moved with my mother, and she was living in Patchogue at the time on Long Island. My mother was in the other room, and the abuses were happening on my mother's pull-out couch in the living room, the door over. My mother was an alcoholic, severely at this particular point in time. However, that night they decided, my uncle, was both of them again. They decided to, and many times I ran away. I used to run away as a kid more times than I knew what to do with. I'd run, I didn't know where to go. Young, started running away when I was 5. They put me in camp, I ran away from camp. They put me at home, they were run away from there. Anytime I was just wanted to run. Like Forrest Gump, just wanted to run. I just wanted to run. I wanted to run as far away from there as possible. But I was too young, I was a child. But when I could, I ran. And I never looked back. And I'm one to preach and teach. Don't run from anything. But if you're being abused and you get the chance that you can leave, risk it and go. No one deserves that abuse. You don't deserve the abuse. They decided they want to go to Hunter Mountain in upstate New York, which is a ski resort. Years later, and not even a little while ago, over this winter, I went to Hunter for the first time since this incident. So my one uncle drove the car while the other uncle was in the back seat with me, and I got abused basically the whole way there. The whole way there, pretty much. And as a time at the child, all I wanted to do was ingest as much drugs and alcohol as I could to not feel the pain. To not feel the pain. Subconsciously, as a child. And I went back to Hunter over the winter, a few months back. And it was like, there I was. I remember where we were, where the car was parked. When we got there, everything was like, I had not thought about that place since I was a child. I even forgot. I put it away so far and said, okay, we're going to stop by Hunter Mountain. Let's go there. We had choice of ski resorts where I was going to go. And I was like, I didn't even think about it. And I picked Hunter. Why would I pick Hunter Mountain? Why would I want to go back there? But it didn't matter anyway. I've dealt with this stuff. And that's what I'm going to explain to you. But it was like, but you know what? This time, I was in control. This time, those memories, and there was no pain. There was no pain. Because I'm safe and secure and confident within myself. I will never let anyone else harm me. Or my children, or anybody else's children. I know, and I'm a big advocate against child abuse. And if you're an adult right now, or even a younger adult and have been abused, or you're being abused and you happen to watch this, we'll go through this in twofold. If you're an adult and you've been abused and you have not faced these issues, you have to face them. And here's the hardest part of it all. You have to forgive the people that abused you as much as you hate them. And I don't hate anybody. I don't even hate my uncles for what they did. And my godfather ended up killing himself just a few years back. Lost everything he had and ended up killing himself. And they say karma, what goes around comes around. However, that was an easy out for him. That was an easy out for this man. And he knew it too, and that's why he did it, because he's a coward. Here was the key. You have to forgive the people that abused you. You have to. You have to forgive them. Once you forgive them, it releases, and I mean truly forgive them. Understand these people are not well. They're not well. No one, and forget about all the studies I've read and all this other stuff. I'm telling you real and simple. No one would abuse a child if they were sane and did not have any serious issues. Whether it's a male to a female, male to male, it doesn't matter. Female to male, it doesn't matter. There's some issues, major issues within them. Like pedophilia has to do with psychiatric, very serious psychiatric issues with children, the pedophiles. Child sexual abuse, child molestation, can be classified in other areas so far as it's not pedophilia, so to speak. However, both of my uncles were pedophiles. Pedophiles. I watched as a child my uncle, my godfather. He has a son, and I'll never mention his name on here or in a book. But I watched him, and this young boy was a child, a baby, not even, man, I think he was 12 months old. 12 months, 16 months old. I watched him molest this little boy, This child, not a little boy, this child, one afternoon in his house in Huntington, just happened to be there, and this is what he thought this is great, and he got off on it. Yet this man would leave there and go function in the public with the Rotary Club and the big major business he had, shake hands with everybody and see people in the public, and he was the best hero to everybody. And in the family, you know, he took care of everybody, and everybody would come to him for things. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Not everything is what it seems. There's many skeletons in the closets of people. Many. Understand what I'm telling you. And understand that these people are sick. And that it's, once you realize it's not your fault, and it really is not your fault, so don't ever think it's your fault. Not even in 1% tile, it's not your fault. Never. Once you have to say to yourself and understand it's not your fault. You have to face what the issue, the abuse was. 2, understand that it's not your fault. And 3, you have to forgive. I know that sounds crazy, but you have to forgive. And under the understanding that these people are not well. And then the people that ignored it, if you did tell anybody, but most children are afraid. Most children are afraid to speak out because, believe it or not, they even feel guilty as a child. You feel guilty as a child. You feel ashamed as a child. And subconsciously as a child, this is what happens, and you're afraid to tell anyone else, or you're threatened by the person who's abusing you, don't tell anybody, or this is going to happen, and then it's fear is instilled, and a lot of abusers instill fear. So you have to forgive these people, and you have to come to grips with the fact that because the issues have happened to you, it's changed you in the things that you do and how you have gone on in your life. And then you have to ask yourself, what has it done to you that may be destroying the relationship you're in? And these are your own issues. Even though they were caused by someone else, they now become your issues and they're in your lap. And you can't run from them. You can try your whole life, but until you face them, they'll still be there and they'll show their ugly face all the time. In the decisions you make, in the relationships, in the people you attract, your careers, everything. You must face this head on. As painful as it may be, you have to face it. But I can assure you, once you face it and identify and you forgive, there's a burden. I mean, there's a burden, peace. There's like a mound lifted off of you, a mountain lifted off of you, to where you can. It's amazing. It's like you just got saved in such a way, and you are saving yourself. You're saving yourself from many more years of making decisions tied to your emotions and your feelings and the pain of what happened to you from being abused. And you may even be able to save a relationship you may be in that's faltering, or you'll definitely have a better relationship because you'll attract better people and you'll handle the relationship better. Or your decisions at work, or your decisions in anything that you do are tied to if you were abused. And don't be ashamed. You see me telling the world here a couple of incidents out of hundreds that have happened to me. I'm not ashamed because wasn't my fault. And I want to help others understand that you can get over this and you can deal with this. But don't live in denial about it. Do not. And if other family members lived in denial and you did tell them and they did nothing, you have to let that go. There's a lot of anger that comes from that and hatred that comes from that towards those people. Meaning they're wrong, but your anger towards them because they did do nothing about it will eat you alive. Is it better to live the rest of your life in peace, or is it better to live the rest of your life in chaos and hurt and pain and anger and bitterness and feeling ashamed. Don't feel ashamed. You have nothing to feel ashamed about. You're a child. It's not your fault. And there's nothing wrong with you that you attracted these people. It's the people that did it that have the serious issues. Please understand what I'm saying to you. People have asked me that I have confidently told some of these stories to over the years. They can't believe I survived it. We're all survivors, or we wouldn't have made it this far in life, regardless of what has happened to us. But the abused people, children that have been abused, and even the young adults that have been abused or have been raped, it's horrible. That's another area I have. If you're an adult and you rape another adult, if a man rapes a woman, and I know, I'm not saying there's a lot of instances where women claim rape and they didn't. I'm talking about the serious ones where they did get raped. Horrible. I have no respect for rapists. I believe they should have a bullet in their head. I believe that's a crime of the sexual abuse, the rape. It's worse than murder, and because the person is affected for the rest of their lives. So the result of the act, the crime, okay, stays with them. Where murder, the person's dead. Yes, the people around it have to deal with that the rest of their lives. But the person themselves is not fighting that demon every day. Being abused and raped. And even, we'll get into it real quickly here. If you have been physically abused, because I was beaten as a child and harbored this anger, and you fought, I've seen that flow over. That I have seen flow over into how fathers and mothers deal with their own children, because they were physically beaten, and they believe that that type of discipline is what a child needs. No, they don't. Beating your child is not going to make your child behave any better. It's going to make them behave worse. Disciplining your child, I'm all for. Beating your child, no. Not even close. If you have to be that much of a coward, I use another word on this show, but I will not. If you're a man and you beat your children or you beat your wife, I'll use the word you're a coward. You're not a man at all. Because you think you're bigger than them, that this is how you have to take your anger and your issues. It's a controlling issue, that you are big and bad and you have control. No, not at all. You got major issues. Don't hit women. Don't beat children. And if you've been the victim of that type of physical abuse, and emotional then goes with it. The verbal and the emotional, any of these abuses, the sexual, the physical, the emotional and the verbal abuse always goes with it, because it goes hand in hand. What was said at the time, what was done. And then the emotional, you cannot be sexually abused or physically abused, but you could be emotionally abused every day by family members, parents, whatever, and they could tell you you're not going to be anything, that you're a horrible child, that this, they can demean you every day. Horrible. Horrible as well. Don't you understand that the reason why this happens is because other people in this cycle, it's a vicious cycle. If they don't face their issues and deal with their issues and identify them and seek help for them, as well as face them within themselves, I can believe you can go for all the help in the world. The biggest help is right between these two ears. We all have control to look in the mirror every day and face our issues. We have that power, and we have that power to change them. The power to change is between these two ears. The brain is so powerful, you can overcome anything in your life, and you can fix anything that's wrong with you. as well as many, many issues, yes. Therapists, psychiatrists can identify the issues and then help you through them as support. I agree. But even with them, as you're sitting there and you're talking to them and they're trying to help you, if you're not between these two ears taking control and wanting to help yourself, and just because you're sitting there doesn't mean you want to help yourself. And maybe you have to go there, or you've been ordered to go there, or you're on disability for it and you got to go there. It could be anything. Take control of your life. Take control of your issues. This is the problem today, and has been today. There's a problem here and I find it more in the United States. There's big problems here with peoples. And our country's suffering for it every day. Our children are suffering. They're starving in the streets. They're being abused physically, emotionally, mentally, you name it. They're not getting educated properly. Parents. And then everybody keeps popping out more children to be on welfare, to take care of these children. I'm not going to go into this. It's not a political show. But my point is, it's disgusting. And it's all because people don't look in the mirror, and because the cycle from one bad parent goes to that kid, and then that kid does it to their kids, and so forth and so forth and so forth. It's a very, very vicious, horrible cycle. You got to stop the cycle. You have to stop the cycle. And if you've been abused, you take the first step in stopping the cycle and identifying and understanding that you have been abused, and accept that. Accept you've been physically, mentally, or emotionally abused, that it's not your fault. And look back and forgive these people within your soul and your heart. I know. Don't carry around hatred of anything in your life. Nothing. Hate nothing and no one. Harbor no anger. You can't fix it. You can't change it as far as what happened. You can't change it. So why harbor that anger with you all the time and that pain? But you can't fix yourself. You can't fix that happened. You can't turn the clock back. We only go forward. Every day is a new bright day. And I have had to work on this for 25 years. I'm 44 now, I'll be 45 on Halloween. Every day for a long time. Now, I help myself the way I need to help myself, as far as I want to help as many people be able to live their lives and not make the same mistakes I have made, and not live, and that's not a mistake as far as the abuse, but the mistake I made was not facing it for the long time. And it's not even a mistake. It's something I blocked out, something I didn't want to face because it's a horrible thing. Horrible thing. And if you don't have the people that support you in your life, if you have been abused and you're in a relationship like that, or you're in a marriage and nobody wants to help you or to face but the main thing, it has to come from you. But if you don't have the support around you, then you need to get the right support. But mainly you need to do it yourself. And if people can't accept you because you've been abused, physically, emotionally, mentally, it doesn't matter. Then get them out of your life. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. Nothing to be ashamed of. The hardest thing I had to deal with was when I was younger, and I look back on it, and I had to look back on it. You're powerless. When another man or woman is forcing themselves onto you, or forcing you to do things to them, you're powerless as a child, because You don't want to, every child wants to be loved, and the way you're getting the love is by pleasing these people and doing what they ask and letting them do what they want to do to you, especially if it's instilled in you from a very young age on. Everybody wants to be loved, especially children. They deserve to be loved. So when they don't get it, or they are getting it, they think they're getting it, any type of attention and love, what they believe is to be love, and you feel powerless as you're laying there and they're touching you and they're doing these horrible things to you. But I'll tell you what, it's made me the strong, powerful man I am today. And it helped me a lot in my business and my success life, because if it wasn't for that anger and that pain, I would have had drive, because I have a lot of drive. But I never would have been driven the way I am, and still driven to this day. And I've overcome a lot of things in my life, even since the incidents of me as a child. And then there was another point in my life where I had to defend myself. And once again, people didn't want to hear the truth. They wanted to hear what they wanted to hear. And even when you showed it to them, they still. Remember, you are the victim. But don't wallow in it. And I'm going to make that clear. Don't wallow in it. Many people who have been abused get so caught up in it that they end up wallowing in it because they get attention because of it. Don't do it. You don't need attention for that. Give yourself the attention you need to deal with those demons. And as I said, identify it. Face it. Admit it. And look at yourself. If you self-analyze yourself every day for a little bit a day, and then find your peaceful spot, and it could be driving your car, it could be anywhere. Look at yourself. Examine yourself. Look at your issues. I've had tons. Made tons of mistakes. You're human. We're human. We make mistakes. We do things, we learn. The key is to learn and face them. Just like your abusers. You have to basically, in your own mind, look them in the eyes. Face them. Forgive them. And deal with it. And that's the first. You have to face it. Especially as an adult. It will destroy your life if you do not. Any type of sexual abuse, physical abuse to a child, and if you have been abused, my heart goes out to you. It's a very, very tough thing to deal with. Very tough. And if you allow it to, it will affect you the rest of your life. Don't do it. Please don't do it. Be strong enough, and you have the strength. You have the strength. And you have everything right here. Seek, identify it. If you need therapy, get into a therapist, then you get into a therapist. And if there's issues you have blocked out, you have to try to bring them about so that they can be dealt with, and you have to forgive. I'm telling you, you must forgive, 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 forgive. Never harbor hate. As I said, you can't fix it. You can't change it. But you can deal with it now. And then live a happy life, a peaceful life within yourself. You'll never be at peace. I don't care if you shove it all the way back in here. You're still never going to be truly at peace until you face it. And until you forgive them. I know. Forgiving them was the hardest thing I ever had to do. But I harbored so much hate for so long and so much anger that I was forced to. And I look back at it now, and I look at them, and I see how, and the younger brother is still alive on Megan's list, where it belongs, because he belongs either locked up forever or shot, because he will do it again, and he probably is still doing it again. And that's the problem with pedophiles. They won't stop. I don't care what treatment you put them in. They're not coming out changed. True story. And statistics are starting to show that. Again, my heart goes out to you. Any of you who have been abused or gone through that, please contact me. I'll be happy to talk to you. You need someone to talk to, you need advice, any of that, happy to talk to you, because I know what it's like. But as I was saying, that was the hardest thing I had to do. But I ended up having to be forced into that. And I survived it all. And there's more atrocious things that have happened to me as a child that I'm not going into on this show. But they will be in my book. And I'll share it more and more as I do different shows about different topics, as I always do, so if people watch me, you understand. But one incident is a horrible demon. Forget about multiple ones. I'm grateful. I'm grateful because I've become the man who I am, and without those incidents, those horrible incidences, I wouldn't be the man I am today. However, I wouldn't have suffered a lot of things if it didn't happen to me and I had a normal childhood and could graduate high school and didn't have exposure to all the drugs and the emotional abuse, sexual, physical, you name it. Never be ashamed. Good night and God bless.